La vérité, je vais dire la vérité. Moi, ce que je veux faire, c'est que mon défenseur pour qui je joue, je veux pas qu'il dort après. Genre, je vais le tuer. Genre, après, il doit me détester.
So, listen to this. If you're one of those people who have been calling Doku a one-trick pony, consider this a gentle warning. Sooner or later, that one trick will bring down your favorite offender, the club you support. Everyone will be on their knees begging him to stop. You may think that makes him predictable, but I dare say it makes him unstoppable. Just go back for a second and watch the great Arjen Robben pull off the same move over and over again. As Bruce Lee once said, I fear not the man who practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And that man is Jeremy Doku. When he drops his shoulder to the left and dashes to the right, it may seem almost rudimentary next to the magical skills of players like Vini Jr., Leroy Sané, Rafael Leão and Kvaratskhelia. In fact, according to the numbers themselves, those four are the best dribblers on the planet, all averaging around 3.5 successful take-ons every 90 minutes. Except, I left one name out of the list. Above those four, that is Jeremy Doku. With over 6 successful take-ons every 90, he is mathematically not just the most dominant one-on-one player in the world, he is almost twice as good as the second best. And it has been like that for a long time. Go back to his time in France, look at the stats, not even Neymar could step up to him. Check the list of the greatest dribblers in the history of the Euros, and in the top 10, alongside Ronaldo, Henry, Iniesta and Zidane, Jeremy Doku, a 22-year-old was barely even stepped foot in the tournament, but all this begs the question, how is he so good? Well, to say that he practiced that dribble 10,000 times would be a gigantic understatement. I mean, have you ever seen his older brother? The guy is a self-proclaimed street footballer, an ex-Anderlecht Academy player who had to quit after multiple injuries. And he does the same dribble. In fact, he even told the press that Jeremy perfected that dribble right here in Borgerhood, every day on the street from early in the morning down to the moment the lights on the square went out. The kid has been practicing this one trick for over 15 years. And let me tell you, if you think he's scary now, you should see how he played when he was 12. After moving around from one tiny club to the other at 7 years of age, the Beerschot scouts found him. And they may not be the biggest club, but trust me, their academy is out of this world. Alderweireld, Moussa Dembele, Nainggolan, Vermaelen, Vertonghen and Victor Wanyama all came out of there, and all went through the same process. 2 trials and 2 training sessions with the team before they decided whether to keep them. But for Doku, they opened an exception, going directly into a training session and getting called up for a match, only to show up half an hour late, at which point he ran to the dressing room, opened his bag and realized he had brought his brother's boots instead of his own. They were 5 sizes too big. Still, with no one being able to find an extra pair he could use, he stuffed his socks and went into the match wearing boots that looked more like clown shoes, and in the words of the scout who had found him, he still scored a load of goals. I can't even remember how many. And from that moment on, as he would go on to say, we won everything. With Jeremy on the pitch, I don't think we ever lost, maybe one game at most. And every time another journalist goes back there, the more stories come out. One of his coaches claimed he was so fast that once while the other team stood to take the kickoff, the referee blew his whistle, the first kid nudged the ball to the other, and before he could touch it, Doku had gotten to it himself. The referee even booked him, thinking that was impossible, but we checked the replay, and there was no foul. He was just that fast, that remarkable, that even the vice mayor of the city, a former futsal international, used to come by to watch his matches. 3 years later, he was already getting scouted by Anderlecht, just like his brother had, and again, it was the same story. Jeremy was a special case. Every meeting, all the scouts would have his name at the top of every list. He was the most desirable recruit in the country, which meant that from the moment they got him, they were already worried about losing him because they knew there was no way of hiding a raw talent like that. He played like a FIFA Street character. He refused to pass the ball, he didn't like running around the pitch or doing anything too physical, but no one could get mad at him because every weekend he decided a match. Even once the other managers started picking up on it and ordering the kids to go rough on him, it didn't matter. As one coach said, the more you challenge him, the more he likes it. If two defenders came for him, he'd go looking for the third. He'd dribble a player, then step on the ball, giving him time to get up, just so he could go past him again. At one point, the club even began scheduling the under 15 and under 16 matches at the same time on two pitches right beside each other. And guess what they did? They'd start Doku in the under 15 match, they'd let him play for 30 minutes, just enough time so he could decide the match, at which point, if the under 16s were behind, he'd be subbed off one game and subbed into the other, often deciding both matches in the same afternoon. By the time he was 15, every scout in Europe knew about him. Every great academy had to watch as he made their supposed child prodigies look completely average, and then it happened. Jurgen Klopp, already eyeing up a possible Sadio Mane replacement, heard of the kid, and in secret, the family went over for a visit. They got a tour of the stadium, training ground, his future school. They talked to Klopp, Gerrard and Salah. They promised both parents a car, a house and jobs, a package of over 3 million euros for a 15-year-old's youth contract. All they needed now was permission from his club. So, knowing Anderlecht were underperforming, struggling midway through a takeover and desperate to get some new players in, they stalled the deal for Markovic all the way down to the last few hours of deadline day and then hit him with a proposal. We'll sign off on it if you give us permission to negotiate with Doku. And they had no choice but to cave in. The whole board pretty much accepted it was a done deal. Even Doku's family was pushing for him to take it, until one day, ex-Anderlecht Academy graduate Romelu Lukaku showed up at their offices, met up with one of the directors for a quick chat, and just happened to ask who the best talent in the academy was, only to get the answer: Jeremy Doku. First time in history we've been unable to convince a young player to stay. To which he replied, "Give me his phone number, I will call him." A week later, Doku had rejected Liverpool. A couple months after that, he was signing his first proper contract with Anderlecht, and by the end of the year, first-team coach Hein van Hazebroek showed up at the academy director's office, asking if he could play in the academy's pitch in preparation for a match where they'd have to play on artificial grass, to which the director said, "Sure, as long as you bring in 2 of our kids to train with you." One of those was obviously Doku, and the day of that first session, that same director was there to watch how it went, and in his own words, Doku was just like bam, bam, bam. After 10 minutes, I told everyone, I don't think they'll ever give him back to us. And he was 100% right. At just 16 years old, only a tad older than Lukaku, the youngest to play for Anderlecht in the 21st century, Doku played the first match of his career, immediately being labeled by the press as pure gold, even though his proper introduction into the team would be delayed until midway through the following season, as a whirlwind of managerial changes would see the club go through 6 managers in the space of a year and a half, only calming down after the arrival of Frankie Verkouteren. Regardless, then, with Anderlecht trailing 2 goals behind against one of the smallest clubs in the league, in an act of desperation he subbed him in, and in 6 minutes not only did he get an assist but then scored another, only to still come out of it with a defeat. No matter what, just 4 days later he was in the starting 11, scoring another decisive goal, earning his place and impressing enough that after only a few months he was getting nicknamed as the new Hazard, as rumors went around that Roberto Martinez planned to make him Belgium's secret weapon for the Euros. But it was at that moment that the pandemic came. Had Doku been called up then, he would have been the 3rd youngest in almost a century, but instead, just as he seemed ready to show himself off to the whole of Europe, he was first forced to stand around and watch as his entire world stood still for 5 months, and then forced to move too fast. In the first 2 months of the season, he got his first 2 minutes with the national team. 3 days later, he got his first start and immediately pulled off one of his signature dribbles to score his first. Suddenly, there were links to Real Madrid, Man United, AC Milan and Newcastle, while Doku seemed much more interested in taking things slow and closing a deal with Rennes, who kept stalling the negotiations, unsure of whether or not he was worth the asking price of 26 million that would make him their all-time record signing, which was enough to get on his nerves and get him to open the season with a streak of 6 goal contributions in 7 matches, getting rid of any doubts. When Doku arrived in France, Rennes had just lost Edouard Mendy and Rafinha. All hopes were on 18-year-old Camavinga, new signing Gihassi, and of course Doku, who had never even left his country. For those first 2 months he struggled. It wasn't even that he couldn't get a goal to save his life. At times, even his dribbling seemed to go out the window. So once the club went on a streak of 13 matches with only 1 win, the fans started to lose their patience as it became more and more likely that they'd miss out on the European competitions. But then, things finally clicked. With 9 matches left in the season, Doku finally opened his goal-scoring tally, and though he'd end up nearly breaking someone's ankle in that same match and getting hit with a 2-game suspension, that goal must have gotten him past some mental block because he went out with the national team, scored and assisted twice, came back, scored in his first game after suspension, created 6 goal-scoring chances in the one after that, and then shocked the entire country by demolishing Bordeaux's defense, completing 12 dribbles in that one match, breaking the league's all-time record that belonged to Neymar. Coming up against him a week later in a match against PSG, and not only coming out of it with more completed dribbles than him and Di Maria put together, but terrorizing their defense so much that he got Kimpembe sent off, somehow still finishing the season as the second player with the most dribbles completed behind only Mbappé, who got almost twice as much game time, leading him to claim that, in my 5 years as a pro, I've never seen someone with so much power, which meant that no matter how poor his start had been, his name ended up on Roberto Martinez's list, making him the youngest Belgian to play in the Euros since Enzo Schifo in 1984. Still, there were no guarantees that he would play. Up to the quarterfinals, the only time he'd stepped on the pitch was in a meaningless match once they had already qualified to the knockouts. But then, Martinez started him against Italy, and not only did he win the penalty for Belgium's only goal, but he completed 8 dribbles, the 3rd highest tally in history, behind only Zidane and Hazard, getting Thierry Henry to tell the press that when you're one-on-one with him, there's only one thing left to do: pray. Suddenly, he was being shortlisted for the Golden Boy Award. His market value was being reported at 50 million. There were transfer rumors everywhere, but again, Doku chose to stay, determined to prove that he could carry Rennes on his back. But instead, he was hit with one of the most devastating, injury-riddled seasons I've seen. First came his hamstring, then his knee twice, the hamstring again, and finally his calf, missing out on 39 matches. Knowing what happened to his brother, I can't even imagine how scared he was that this could be the end. And still, would you believe me that when the next season started, though he was still unable to play for the full 90, Rennes handed him the number 10 shirt and put full confidence in him as their new star player? That even with 2 more injuries in the first 3 months of the season, he still got a call up to the World Cup in December. Anyone could see it was a matter of time before the stars aligned for him. So, in February 2023, Doku played his first full 90 after 644 days struggling with his fitness, and though the next month he injured his hamstring again, once he made it back for good. With Rennes in 6th, about to miss out on the European competitions, on his first start, he opened the scoring with a great solo run, then scored another to take the win. 2 weeks later, with their match tied at half-time, Doku put them in front with a crazy volley, then scored through yet another great solo run, then 2 assists 15 days later and a 3rd solo run, and they came after that, this time all the way from his own half to close out the season with 5 goals in the last 8 matches, as well as a measly 2 assists, considering he had created 16 goal-scoring chances over that period. But regardless, what mattered the most had been achieved. He had dragged Rennes all the way up to 4th, the 2nd highest finish in their history, earning them qualification to the Europa League. While 400 miles away in Manchester, City had let go of Sterling, Mahrez as well as Gabriel Jesus, and were about to let go of Palmer, not to mention that Grealish was injured, so it didn't take much thought. They needed a player capable of slicing through low blocks with ease, and Doku, well, imagine what he could do playing in a team that ate up all the possession, feeding him 1v1 scenarios one after the other. He had just finished the season with the most successful take-ons per 90 out of anyone in Europe. The kid had one of the rarest profiles in the football world. Regardless, he still opened the season with Rennes, scoring in the opening match while dropping one of the best performances of his career, not just taking the man of the match, but receiving a standing ovation. And again, that must have settled it for City, who did what they had to do and laid 65 million euros on the table. Once in Manchester, to start things off, Pep claimed that they had run a 1v1 drill in training and that Doku had pretty much smoked every defender, dropping Kyle Walker over and over again. But as the hype hit a new peak, he went into his debut and barely resembled himself, afraid of taking on players, so Pep went up to him and said, "Why are you here? Why did we spend so much money on you? For your skills. You've done it all your life, so do it. Do it if you're one-on-one, 1 against 2 or 3. It all depends on you. and from then on, the only thing he needed was time. In this case, 14 days. 46 minutes into his second match with City behind, Doku rushed into the penalty area and smacked in the equalizer, setting off their comeback and almost leaving Guardiola speechless, claiming, "The way he played today, it's been a long time since I've seen anything like it." And he wasn't about to stop. 3 weeks later, he came in with 18 minutes left on the clock as City were about to settle for a draw against Leipzig, and not only assisted the goal that put them in front, but put in a massive run to score his own before the final whistle. 2 games after that, he assisted another in a narrow win against Brighton, taking the man of the match, and yet that was far from the highlight of the night. Doku gave James Milner such a rough time on the wing that he had to be subbed out at half-time, as the commentators joked that they felt sorry for him. Even when they asked Guardiola how impressed he was, he just said, "More than you believe." And look, not only have I left out the fact that he also pulled off 4 assists in 3 matches with the national team at that same time, but none of that got even remotely close to what he did in the very next match. In his game against Bournemouth, Doku went in by playing a 1-2 with Hodri and smacking in the opener from the edge of the box. 3 minutes later, he completely bamboozled the defender with a humiliating bit of skill before playing in Bernardo for the second, and just another 4 minutes after that, he hit a shot from outside the box that deflected off Akanji and ended up in the net. 3 goal contributions in just 7 minutes, and even then, he made sure to come back, getting away from his defender with his signature dribble and playing it to Foden, who scored the 4th, finally closing out his day by putting Bernardo Silva through with a ridiculous pass to become the youngest player in history to total 5 goal contributions in a single match. Matter of fact, only Bergkamp, Fabregas, Pogba and Kane had ever managed 4 assists in a single Premier League game. As one newspaper wrote, this 21-year-old had brought the Premier League down to its knees. That night, he was the best player on the planet, and there was still plenty of time for more. 21 days later, it was time for his trial by fire, time to go against Alexander-Arnold, considered by many the best fullback in the league, and the result was out of this world. Doku dribbled past him 7 times across those 90 minutes, getting 12 dribbles in total, the most anyone had gotten against Liverpool in history, the most anyone had gotten in a single match across all of Europe that season. And the worst of all, remember that man of the match performance he put down in the first match of the season while still playing for Rennes? He got 9 in that match, which still was the season record in Ligue 1, meaning Doku was the record holder for 2 different leagues at the same time. He seemed unstoppable, but that was only because everyone was so mesmerized they had forgotten his one weakness. Only 1 match later, Doku was sidelined with a muscle injury, and once he made it back, as Pep tried to slowly bring him back into the team, he went 14 matches without a goal or assist. And though he started picking up form in the last 2 months of the season, causing Real Madrid so much trouble, some fans began arguing that had Pep not subbed him off, they would have won the match. Not to mention that he completely dominated every dribbling shot at the Euros despite Belgium's disastrous performance. The question needs to be asked, with such powerful acceleration, such unpredictable twisting and turning, will Jeremy Doku ever be able to stay fit? As his old manager said, playing the way he does, he will run himself into the ground.